Picture this. You're scrolling through social media, having a perfectly normal day, when suddenly someone's comment hits you like a slap in the face. Your heart races, your jaw clenches, and before you know it, you're typing a furious response. Sound familiar? Here's the thing that might surprise you. Getting offended easily isn't actually about other people at all. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off every time you burn toast. The detector isn't broken, but it's definitely oversensitive. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology behind why some of us have emotional smoke detectors that seem to go off at the slightest provocation. And trust me, understanding this might just change how you see yourself and the world around you forever. The first characteristic that makes someone prone to taking offense is what psychologists call emotional dysregulation. Think of your emotions like a car's accelerator. Some people have a smooth, gradual pedal that responds proportionally to pressure, while others have what feels like an on-off switch. When you struggle with emotional regulation, it's like your brain's emotional processing center is working overtime without a good filtration system. Every comment, every look, every perceived slight gets amplified through this hypersensitive emotional lens. It's not that you're choosing to overreact. Your brain is genuinely interpreting neutral or mildly negative stimuli as major threats. This happens because the part of your brain responsible for emotional processing, the limbic system, sometimes develops a hair-trigger response, often due to past experiences that taught it to be constantly on guard. What's fascinating is that this emotional hypersensitivity often starts in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where you had to constantly read the room to feel safe, maybe walking on eggshells around volatile family members or being criticized frequently, your brain learned that survival meant being hypervigilant to any sign of disapproval or rejection. It's like your nervous system became a 24/7 security guard that never learned when it was safe to relax. This creates a pattern where you're unconsciously scanning every interaction for potential threats to your emotional safety, making you more likely to interpret ambiguous situations as personal attacks. The second major characteristic is having what we call fragile self-esteem, but not in the way you might think. This isn't about thinking you're worthless. It's about having self-worth that feels like a house of cards, constantly at risk of collapsing with the slightest disturbance. People with fragile self-esteem often have a sense of self that depends heavily on external validation and approval. It's like building your identity on quicksand instead of solid ground. When someone makes a comment that could be interpreted as criticism, it doesn't just feel like they're commenting on your behavior or opinion. It feels like they're attacking the very foundation of who you are as a person. This fragility often manifests as defensiveness, but underneath that defensive armor is usually a deep fear of not being good enough. The paradox is that the more desperately we need others to see us positively, the more likely we are to interpret their words through the lens of potential rejection. It's like wearing glasses that make everything look like criticism, even when it's not. This creates an exhausting cycle where you're constantly on the defensive, which actually pushes people away and creates the very rejection you were trying to avoid in the first place. The third characteristic involves something called cognitive distortions. Basically, your brain's way of playing tricks on you by interpreting situations in ways that aren't necessarily accurate. One of the biggest culprits here is mind reading, where you assume you know exactly what someone meant by their words or actions, usually assuming the worst possible interpretation. It's like your brain has become a fortune teller, but one that only predicts doom and gloom. Another common distortion is personalizing, where you take responsibility for things that aren't actually about you at all. Think about it this way. If someone seems grumpy or makes a short comment, instead of considering that they might be having a bad day, dealing with personal stress, or simply communicating in their normal style, you immediately assume it's because they don't like you or are intentionally trying to hurt you. Your brain skips over dozens of other possible explanations and jumps straight to the one that confirms your fears about being disliked or rejected. This isn't stupidity. It's a survival mechanism gone haywire, like a car alarm that goes off when a leaf falls on it. The fourth characteristic is what psychologists call emotional reasoning. The tendency to believe that because you feel something strongly, it must be objectively true. If someone's words make you feel attacked, your brain concludes that you were actually attacked, regardless of the other person's actual intentions. It's like trusting a compass that's sitting next to a magnet. The reading feels real and urgent, but it's not pointing to true north. This type of reasoning can be incredibly convincing because emotions feel so real and immediate, but feelings aren't always facts. This emotional reasoning often combines with something called confirmation bias, where your brain actively looks for evidence that supports what you already believe while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. So if you feel offended by someone's comment, your mind will replay every previous interaction with that person, highlighting anything that could be interpreted as negative while conveniently forgetting all the neutral or positive moments. It's like having a detective in your head who's already decided someone is guilty and is now building a case to prove it, rather than objectively investigating what really happened. The fifth characteristic involves boundary confusion, not knowing where you end and others begin. Emotionally speaking, this is like having emotional skin that's too thin, where other people's moods, opinions, and energy directly penetrate and affect your internal state. When someone criticizes an idea you have, it doesn't feel like they're commenting on the idea itself. It feels like they're criticizing you as a person. When someone is in a bad mood, you absorb that energy and start feeling bad too, often without even realizing it's happening. This boundary confusion often stems from growing up in families where emotional boundaries weren't respected or modeled properly. Maybe you had parents who took their bad days out on you, or who expected you to manage their emotions for them. Over time, you learn to be so tuned into other people's emotional states that you forgot how to maintain your own emotional center. It's like living in a house with paper-thin walls where you can hear every conversation in the neighborhood. Eventually, you lose track of which thoughts and feelings are actually yours. People with healthy emotional boundaries can hear criticism or disagreement without feeling like their entire sense of self is under attack. They're like houses with good insulation. They can be aware of what's happening outside without being completely affected by it. But when your boundaries are unclear, every external stimulus feels personal and immediate, making you much more likely to feel offended by things that aren't actually about you at all. Now, here's where I want to pause for a moment and thank everyone who clicked on this video and decided to spend their time here with us today. I know there are countless things you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're here, genuinely trying to understand yourself better, says something beautiful about who you are as a person. Understanding why we react the way we do isn't always comfortable, but it's one of the most powerful gifts we can give ourselves. The sixth characteristic is what we might call unhealed wounds, or unresolved trauma responses. Sometimes, getting easily offended is actually your psyche's way of protecting old injuries that never properly healed. It's like having a broken bone that was never set correctly. Even light pressure on that area can cause intense pain. These wounds might be from childhood experiences of rejection, abandonment, criticism, or humiliation. They could be from more recent experiences like betrayal in relationships, workplace bullying, or social rejection. When someone's words or actions unconsciously remind your brain of these past hurts, your nervous system can react as if the original trauma is happening all over again. This isn't dramatic or oversensitive. It's actually a normal neurobiological response. Your brain, trying to protect you, sounds the alarm bells at the first sign of anything that resembles past danger. The problem is that this protective mechanism can't distinguish between a real current threat and something that just reminds it of an old threat. So you end up responding to present situations with the emotional intensity that belong to past experiences. What makes this particularly tricky is that these trauma responses often happen below the level of conscious awareness. You might not even remember the specific incidents that created the sensitivity, but your body and unconscious mind certainly do. It's like having an invisible bruise that you can't see but that hurts every time it gets bumped. This is why sometimes your reaction to being offended might feel disproportionate even to you. Part of you knows logically that the situation doesn't warrant such a strong response, but another part of you is responding to something much deeper and older. The seventh and perhaps most important characteristic is the presence of unmet core needs for acceptance. belonging, and emotional safety. At the deepest level, getting easily offended often signals that these fundamental human needs aren't being adequately met, either currently or historically. It's like being emotionally malnourished. When you're starving for acceptance and belonging, even small signs of potential rejection feel catastrophic because they threaten your most basic psychological survival needs. This need for acceptance often gets complicated by what psychologists call conditional love experiences, where you learned early on that love and acceptance were dependent on being perfect, pleasing others, or avoiding conflict. If your worth was constantly conditional growing up, your adult brain might still be operating from the belief that one mistake, one moment of disapproval, one sign of rejection could mean losing love entirely. It's like walking on a tightrope where you believe that one wrong step means falling into an abyss, when in reality, most of the time you're only a few feet off the ground. Understanding this can be incredibly liberating because it helps you realize that your sensitivity isn't a character flaw. It's actually your psyche's attempt to protect something very precious, your need to be loved and accepted. The problem is that this protective mechanism often backfires, creating the very rejection it's trying to prevent by making you reactive, defensive, or overly sensitive in ways that can push people away. Now, you might be wondering, okay, but how do I actually change this pattern? The beautiful thing about understanding these characteristics is that awareness is the first step toward transformation. When you can recognize that your offense is often more about your internal landscape than about what the other person actually did or intended, you create space for a different kind of response. It's like realizing you've been wearing tinted glasses that made everything look threatening. Once you know the glasses are there, you can choose when to take them off. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to pause between stimulus and response. When you feel that familiar surge of offense rising up, instead of immediately reacting, try taking a breath and asking yourself, what is this really about? Am I responding to what actually just happened? Or am I responding to something older and deeper? This isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't matter. It's about getting curious about them instead of being controlled by them. Another crucial element is developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and name your emotions more precisely. Instead of just feeling offended, try to notice what's underneath that. Are you feeling hurt, scared, disappointed, ashamed, angry? Each of these emotions gives you different information about what's happening internally and what you might need. It's like upgrading from a basic emotional vocabulary to having a rich, nuanced understanding of your inner world. Learning to separate your feelings from facts is another game-changing skill. Just because something feels true doesn't mean it is objectively true. Your emotions are valid and important sources of information, but they're not infallible truth-tellers. It's like learning the difference between weather and climate. Your emotional weather in any given moment might be stormy, but that doesn't mean your overall emotional climate is doomed to be perpetually turbulent. Building genuine self-worth from the inside out is perhaps the most important long-term solution. This means developing a sense of your own value that isn't dependent on constant external validation. It's like building your house on bedrock instead of sand. When your foundation is solid, you can weather storms without your entire structure being threatened. This doesn't happen overnight, and it often requires healing old wounds and challenging long-held beliefs about your worth. Practicing emotional regulation skills can also make a tremendous difference. This might include techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, grounding exercises, or simply learning to notice when your nervous system is getting activated and giving yourself permission to step back and self-soothe before responding. It's like learning to be your own emotional first aid provider instead of always needing someone else to rescue you from your feelings. Here's something that might sound counterintuitive but is incredibly powerful. Learning to get comfortable with disapproval and criticism. I'm not talking about seeking it out or accepting abuse, but rather developing the capacity to hear disagreement or negative feedback without it feeling like a threat to your entire existence. It's like building emotional muscles. The more you practice tolerating mild discomfort, the stronger you become at handling bigger challenges. Developing empathy and perspective-taking skills can also dramatically reduce how often you feel offended. When you can genuinely consider that other people are usually dealing with their own struggles, insecurities, and challenges, their words and actions become less about you and more about their own human experience. It's like switching from a first-person perspective to a third-person perspective in the movie of your life. Suddenly, you can see the bigger picture and understand that you're not the center of everyone else's universe. Building genuine connections and community is another crucial element. When you have solid relationships where you feel truly known and accepted, individual moments of conflict or misunderstanding don't feel as threatening. It's like having multiple streams feeding into a river instead of depending on one trickle for your entire water supply. When your need for acceptance and belonging is being met in healthy ways, you're less likely to desperately seek it or defensively protect it in every interaction. Learning to communicate your needs and boundaries clearly can also prevent many situations that lead to feeling offended. Often, we feel hurt or attacked when really we just need to express what we need or don't need in a relationship or situation. It's like learning to use GPS instead of hoping people will magically know where you want to go. Clear communication prevents a lot of misunderstandings and reduces the likelihood of interactions that trigger your sensitivities. And speaking of communication, if you're enjoying this content and finding it helpful, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that like button. Think of it as giving your emotional growth a little high five. You're here doing the hard work of understanding yourself better, and that deserves to be celebrated. Plus, it helps this video reach other people who might really need to hear this message too. It's also important to recognize that healing from emotional hypersensitivity is not about becoming emotionally numb or disconnected. The goal isn't to stop caring what people think or to become indifferent to how others treat you. Healthy sensitivity is actually a beautiful gift. It allows you to be empathetic, intuitive, and deeply connected to others. The goal is to develop what we might call wise sensitivity, the ability to be emotionally open and responsive while still maintaining your center and not being overwhelmed by every stimulus. Sometimes, working with a therapist or counselor can be incredibly helpful in this process, especially if your sensitivity stems from unresolved trauma or deep-seated patterns that are hard to change on your own. There's no shame in getting professional support. Think of it like hiring a personal trainer for your emotional fitness. Sometimes we need expert guidance to learn new skills and heal old wounds effectively. Remember that change takes time, and be patient with yourself as you develop these new ways of being. You're essentially rewiring neural pathways that may have been developing for years or even decades. It's like learning a new language. At first it feels clunky and unnatural, but with practice, it becomes more fluid and automatic. There will be setbacks and moments when you fall back into old patterns, and that's completely normal and part of the process. One of the most beautiful realizations you can have is that your sensitivity, when properly understood and channeled, can actually be one of your greatest strengths. Sensitive people often make incredible artists, healers, leaders, and friends because they can feel deeply and understand the nuanced emotional landscape of human experience. The key is learning to work with your sensitivity rather than being victimized by it. As we wrap up this conversation, I want you to remember that understanding why you get offended easily isn't about judging yourself or feeling ashamed of your reactions. It's about compassionately recognizing the parts of you that are trying to protect something precious. Your need to be loved, accepted, and emotionally safe. These parts of you aren't broken. They're just working overtime trying to keep you safe in the only way they know how. The invitation here is to become curious about your own reactions instead of immediately defensive about them. When you feel that familiar surge of offense, try treating it like a messenger rather than an enemy. What is it trying to tell you about what you need or what you're afraid of? This kind of self-awareness is the foundation of emotional freedom and healthier relationships. If this video resonated with you, I'd love for you to give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing this message. Sometimes the people we care about are struggling with these same patterns, and they might not even realize there's another way to experience the world. And if you made it all the way to the end with us, drop the word curious in the comments. It's such a powerful word because curiosity is the antidote to reactivity, and it shows you're committed to understanding yourself at a deeper level. There's another video that's about to appear on your screen that dives even deeper into building emotional resilience and self-worth from the inside out. If you're ready to continue this journey of understanding yourself better, I think you'll find it really valuable. And if you want to stay connected for more content like this, consider subscribing to the Not What It Seems channel. But only if it feels right for you. No pressure, just an invitation to keep growing together.